When is a hat not a hat? I get a lot of grief about this. It's been with me forever, and it was something I got part of our family trip, first time we went to Disney, and it's been with me on trips right around, well, North America, and it brings back memories. It's an inanimate object. It doesn't mean anything other than what it means to me. And you might come to an air show and think something like this, which is a model, is cool, but it's not flying. It's not exciting. But if you knew the story of what this represents and why it is here and who it is named for, you'd find out that it's a time machine in its own right. This is Maritime Machines. I'm Sheldon McLeod.
Mario Hamill rolls around the smoke trail, produced by Danford 10 CJ6. They call this maneuver the corkscrew.
I'm the executive director of Airshow Atlantic.
How many air shows is this now?
This is my 20th air show.
Congratulations.
Thank
I've
you
known you a
very much.
long time. It's so
Yep.
great to finally get to be together in an event like this.
Yeah, I'm thrilled.
The history of aircraft and the legacy of the people who make all of that history possible. How important is that to give the lessons? How much of a teaching tool are air shows?
Well, we're a not-for-profit, and what we do is we tell stories through events. And the event is Airshow Atlantic, and the stories that we tell are varied. They're from amazing entertainment to honoring our veterans, to exhibiting the teamwork and the professionalism of the Canadian Forces team as they work together, whether that's 17 Skyhawks jumping out of the back of an airplane, or it's 9 snowbirds flying together, or if it's what it takes for a team of 7 to travel across the country with a CF-18 Hornet and keep it maintained and flying for air shows. So teamwork, teamwork, teamwork is the Canadian Forces. And we'll have aircraft on the ground showing that as well, so you can get up close to a Cyclone pilot or someone like that and engage them on the static line. So a big part of it is the Canadian Forces. We entertain our fans, we honor our veterans, and mostly we make a big impact on the community. Like, we're over a $2 million economic impact when we come to town. A lot of that is direct in things like hotel rooms and gasoline and rentals and all the tents you see here and the fencing that went up and the golf carts that we rented, all that spending. And then there's a spin-off of the thousands of fans who travel here to enjoy the show as well.
Who, in your opinion, is an air show for? Who do you do this for?
Sea Kings have been flying over my house since they arrived in 1963. I was born a few years later, but I've been looking up at Sea Kings my entire life. I don't get to do that anymore. If a Sea King flew over right now, I would look up. Now, you'd think after a while, you wouldn't look up anymore. You say, oh, a Sea King going by. But the fascination with flight goes back to Icarus and his wings made of wax. Okay? Flight is just something that captures us. And we don't just exhibit flight that you can see at the Halifax Stanfield Airport. You know, people line up along the fence outside on the road and they watch airplanes take off all day long. What we show is that teamwork I talked about earlier, but what we show is aircraft doing things at the edge of aviation. Okay? When you see Pitt's aerobatic plane or a Yak 55 this weekend, or you see the Long Easy, which doesn't even look like it should be an airplane. Okay? If you see those aircraft doing what they do, you're seeing somebody taking it to the other edge of flying. We so much take flying for granted because of trying to get through Pearson and getting on an airliner and lineups and Nexus cards and all that stuff. You know, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about leading edge flying, and that's what's exciting to people, and there isn't anybody who doesn't love that. We just want them to love it enough to buy a ticket.
This is Debert. Tell me what you know about this facility.
Oh, sure. We were really interested in Debert because of its location. In Nova Scotia, it's challenging to find an airport that can host an air show, whether it's too busy or remote from where the fans are. Debert is unique in that it's halfway between Moncton and Halifax, roughly. However, it's an old British Commonwealth Air Training Plan base. So in World War II, as part of that training plan, twin-engine Ansons and twin-engine Mosquitoes were mainly used at this base to train. So this place was very busy, lots of hangars, lots of people around, and it was just part of that huge legacy of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan.
And it shut down as an official training facility, was it in the early 60s?
Well, it actually transferred into mostly use by the Army after World War II. The Air Force was done with its training plan, right, and the Army actually took over the property. Something, you know, like acres and acres and acres around us had Army training grounds on it, and it's home to one of the Diefenbunkers. Right. So the bunker just down the road here is like 6 stories underground. What happens if Halifax gets attacked? This is where the government goes, that type of stuff. So it's a really unique place. And while it's got a 5,000-foot runway, which is a little shorter than most airshow runways, ideally we want about 8,000 feet to be able to operate. Right. But this is a 5,000-foot runway, which is ideal for a lot of the performers that we have.
Those wings are kind of attached to the midsection of the fuselage, and they're very, very thick.
Is there anything in particular you can show us or explain to us about how this connects with the history of this place, of this region?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things we talked about was the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, okay? And one of the iconic aircraft of that era was the Harbord, the North American 2-seat Harbord. It was the last airplane a pilot got to fly, 2-seater, before he was given a Hurricane or a Mustang or a Spitfire to fly that in combat. And so this is a high-performance aircraft that would have been the last one he flew in the training plan. So as soon as we secured Debert as a site, the first thing I did was find me a Harbord.
And there's a club in Ontario. There's, I think, 9 or 10 aircraft there. Is that where this was coming from?
Yeah. This is Kent Beckham is a former member of CHAT, the Canadian Harbord Aerobatic Team, who flew together for 20 years. Is a 3-plane, sometimes a 4-plane formation, and now he does solos by himself because that team retired after 20 years on the circuit. But we're happy to have Kent back. First time back here since 2008.
It makes you smile, doesn't it? Yeah.
MariTIME, former CF-18 pilot with the Canadian Air Force, okay? Now flying the Yak-55, and in about an hour, his wife Edith will be arriving in their second airplane, the Decathlon 2-seater, with which he will do a banner tow, okay, and take media flights in, because that's just a 1-seater, and they bring a 2-seater as well.
Right. This is Maritime Machines, and I'm Sheldon McLeod. And it was in 2010 that I got a call, an opportunity to work with an amazing broadcaster. I got to be Jenn Casey's co-anchor at a radio station in Halifax. And she knew so much about sports. She knew so much about a lot of things. And she had a real passion for flight and for, well, eventually the job that was her dream job. She worked as the communications person with the CF-18 team, eventually becoming the comms person with the Canadian Snowbird team. She was the voice of that as well. And talking with people here in Debert who knew her as a student, knew her as a reporter, and of course knew her for her role with that team. And it was on May 17th of 2020 that that bright star went dim far too soon. And it's a real opportunity for us to bring it all full circle, to know that Captain Jenn Casey will forever be a part of Airshow Atlantic. And it is a real honor to be here for part of that.
I'd like to first acknowledge Rose Casey, Jen's mom. It's an honor to have you with us. While we're here to remember Jenn and claim a little piece of her that will live with this show, she was and always will be yours first. Thank you for sharing her. I'm just taking off my glasses. You can clearly see that I'm crying, and I have no intention of not. There's something that you can really be certain about with Jenn, is that she was full of emotion too. The good thing was her emotions were mostly joy, enthusiasm, curiosity, and excitement. And that's the way we're choosing to remember her. We got to know Jenn before she joined the Canadian Forces. She was actually a King's journalism student, the first air show she came to, and met us. and certainly spent a lot of time with Tracy. Came back with 95.7, where you at Sheldon, there you are. Worked with Sheldon at 95.7 News and covered the show as a media reporter. Then she went off and joined the Canadian Forces, returned to our show as a member of the Canadian Forces Hornet CF-18 demonstration team, and then finally came back again as the public affairs officer for the CF Snowbirds. So we got to know her pretty well. The photographer area, the media center, it's a place that changes every time we go to a new location because the airport's different, the layout's different, where VIP's going to be, where the runways are, everything's different. The one thing that is going to stay the same from here forward for all of our shows is that this will be known as the Captain Jenn Casey Media and Photographer Center. This, or a version like it, will be at all of our shows from now on, supporting the legacy that she helped forge as a member of a team. And we're really, really happy that you guys are here to share this moment with us. And we're going to have lots of these moments in the years to come because we will not forget her.
Yes. Amazing to be here. And this is quite an honor.
Got a camera following me.
We certainly do. What's this mean to you to know that Jen's impact is still being felt?
A little overwhelming. We're very glad you're here with us today.
I had printed off the Casey crest that you put on the web, and I very much thank you. It still rides with me on the bike, absolutely. And it was a real honor to work with Jen and to get to know her.
We keep meeting people that we don't know, and that she was like meaningful to, like years after. I'm sure it'll keep going for years after this.
Yeah, it's like you didn't know the connection with Tracy going back as far as it did, right?
Yeah. So, the thing about a personality that's so gregarious, she was not afraid to talk or argue with anybody.
So neither one of us were wallflowers. So.
Not at all. I think this is a very fitting tribute, and I really am honored to be here to see it. So thank you. So I'd mentioned I started working with Jenn Casey in 2010. Mm-hmm. And May 17th of 2020 was the accident that we lost Jenn Casey. Why was it so important to make her a permanent part of Airshow Atlantic?
That Sunday afternoon, we started getting the word, and Tracy, Sean, and I were on the phone together, and we found out that it was her. And we were wrecked. We were just wrecked. She was family. She's not only our Halifax girl, but the Snowbirds have been with us 30 years. The Skyhawks have been with us, the CF-18's been with us since 1983, and she was parts of that team. And it was just losing a member of the family, really.
I have to say, I had reached out to the team to do an interview. Because I knew Jen, she said, I can get you one of the pilots, but I want to be on the radio with you.
Sure.
And that was a devastating moment. How does something like that affect air shows and the trust people have that is as safe as it can be?
Oh, well, we have no question about, safety. I mean, aviation, jet trucks, driving on the road, taking the bus, everything has inherent risks in it. We were very, very unfortunate that a series of things happened. That's how we lost Jen. We have no reservations whatsoever about the Snowbirds and their operational pause and them being back in the air sometime soon. And we're missing them this weekend. There's no question of that. But we carry on. We've got a 30-plus year record of great success with the team, and we lean on that.
So tell me, what is it we're looking at? What is this?
We're looking at a prop that was built for the tattoo many, many years ago.
What year?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. late 70s, I would think.
All right.
I'm not really sure the exact year at all. But he built it actually. My father was an estimator planner at the dockyard in Halifax, and he worked half the year his regular job, and then the other half of the year he worked on tattoo props.
And what did you think of your dad's side gig, or his hobby, or this passion, if you will?
It was a passion. I was always very proud of what he was doing. So building this and building models like this, he would research the plans and go and get as much as he could.
Pre-internet days, so this was books and paper and knowledge that people held.
Libraries,
right.
Military libraries and those kind of things.
We're here at the Debert airfield, and this is part of MariTIME Machines. I'm Sheldon McLeod.
My father built this aircraft. So he built this one. This is 2/3 scale Spitfire. He built also a Sea King. That's at the Shearwater Military Aviation Museum. And he did a Lancaster, a smaller Lancaster. He built Robbie the robot, and many other things as well. He had a dirigible that he built.
So where did he do all the construction? Was it at the home? Or?
No. He did it at the dockyard. So he had a couple of helpers, okay, and they built it in the old fire hall. And it was quite the day, I remember, when they rolled it out. And they rolled it out, and whatever, it was complete, but it wasn't painted yet, or whatever, and it had to be painted in colors of Battle of Britain type colors and whatever at that time.
So this is the history of the model, not the history of the Spitfire.
The Spitfire, yes.
And so this is the story you were just talking about, okay? Here's the original paint job, okay? And it was camouflage, green and brown. DB was for Douglas Bader, okay? And Douglas Bader was the squadron leader of 242 Squadron, and it was almost all manned by Canadians.
Okay.
So he's a British pilot, and he's a famous British pilot who actually lost both legs in the early 30s, one above the knee, one below the knee, and still flew in the Battle of Britain. Wow. Was captured by the Germans, escaped, okay, after they had legs delivered, okay, by parachute, because Adolf Galland, who a very famous German fighter ace, had them delivered by parachute to Bader because he was in prison and he needed legs. And he escaped with the new legs and they recaptured him. He was a pain. Then, when the museum got it after the tattoo was done with it in 1990, that was the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, okay? The museum at Shearwater got it, and they painted it up like a Canadian Navy Seafire. Now, the Canadian Navy flew Seafires in the late 1940s. The Battle of Britain, they were flying Mach 1 Spitfires, okay? And this Seafire would be like a 14 or something like that, much more advanced. Right. And of course, these were designed to land on aircraft carriers. So Canada's first aircraft carrier, HMCS Warrior, okay, had Seafires on board, and they flew around Dartmouth out of Shearwater for years. Okay, so that's why Shearwater put that paint job on it.
Right.
And in 2010, when it came from the museum on loan to us, we put a fresh Seafire paint job on it, which you see there. And then in 2015, we took it back to a Battle of Britain Spitfire for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Britain.
What is so special about this particular model is that it was built for a very specific purpose. Talk us through how people might remember seeing this at a Royal Canadian Tattoo.
This was only built as a prop. The parameters were it had to be assembled on the form floor, okay, in about 30 seconds in the pitch dark. And then after the scene was done, okay, then it had to be disassembled as well in the same 30 seconds. And there would be a short guy, a short pilot who would walk up the wing, okay, enter the cockpit, okay, and then start to fire up the engines. So you'd have exhaust coming out of this, and this was all done remote control,
right?
Okay, the prop would start to spin, okay, the rudder would probably start to move, and I think the ailerons work here as well. So he could control those with a stick actually from the cockpit, okay. So that was the beginning of the scene, and then there would be narration, whatever, as well. And then the scene would be over, and then bang, it had to be all disassembled. So this aircraft is in 3 large pieces, okay?
I have a big question about
Sure.
that. If you're doing research about a Spitfire,
Yeah.
you're not going to find anything that tells you how to build it in 3 pieces so it can be
No.
put together in 30
No,
seconds.
that's-
So how did he figure that out?
Hell, he was the engineer, I'm not. So I really can't tell you, but he was the engineer.
And what was your father's name?
My father's name was Ari Hackert. It probably means more to me than it would have ever meant to him. He was just, you know, he was satisfied in doing a good job and producing the product that he was asked to produce in incredible odds, against incredible odds, because, you know, he was the guy that had to make it happen. And he was always proud that he was able to pull it off.
I'm very grateful for you sharing that story, connecting me to that history, and it is a true pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk about my father's work. Thank you.
So I see Flight Officer J.S. Hart.
Okay, this is the coolest part of the story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, hold this.
Holding.
So, when in 2015 we said we're going to paint the Spitfire and make it a Spitfire again from the Seafire, okay? We said let's get some Atlantic Canadian history into this thing. So we did some research and we found John Hart. John Hart from Sackville, New Brunswick, learned to fly in Halifax at the old Chebucto Road Airport, okay, where the Halifax Shopping Center is now. Okay, he learned to fly there. He joined the RAF in 1939 before Canadians were going over. So he ended up in a Royal Air Force squadron instead of a Canadian squadron, like Squadron 1 or 242 or one of those. So because of the difference, almost all the Canadians that were flying Hurricanes. John Hart is the only Atlantic Canadian to fly a Spitfire in the Battle of Britain. So it makes sense. LO 602 Squadron, City of Glasgow Squadron in the RAF. H is for Hart. Flying Officer J.S. Hart served as one of the 112 Canadians that flew in the Battle of Britain. He actually participated with this exact paint job in the shooting down of a Dornier 117 airplane from the Germans. So we've got lots of stories about him, but there's John Hart with his 602 Squadron mates during the Battle of Britain. He actually flew through the war. He ended up as a squadron leader in Burma, flying Hurricanes, and I believe he flew Mustangs in Italy. And he retired after the war to Namata, British Columbia. So when we did all this research, we said, well, we better get permission from his family to be able to use his name and put, you know, his name on the side of the airplane. So I called out to Namata and I'm looking for John Hart. Phone rings, guy answers, and I said, I'm looking for John Hart. He says, this is John Hart. I said, no, I'm looking for John Hart who flew in the Battle of Britain. He says, this is John Hart. And I nearly drove my truck off the road.
What's it like to maintain and to preserve something like this?
As you learned from your previous interview, it was very well built. The trouble is with the skin, because we display it outdoors, and for years we didn't have a beautiful big trailer to put it on. If it wasn't for the passion, there's no way anybody would want to do this, because it's just a lot of work to keep it the way it is. And so that's why we invested so heavily in something to protect it.
Now, in the Model 12.
As I said, we're storytellers, and stories have people in them. You know, machines are cool. The people are the things we remember. And that's why we talk about the John Hart Spitfire. That's why it's a Jenn Casey Photographer and Media Center. That's, you know, that's why we attach people, because the stories are important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheldon.